For the next few minutes of bhajan, we're sitting down. Practice a lot. It's a song that probably almost all of you already know, but we'll be using the words.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right now.
Proceed.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I'll just start.
Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Gauraya Pushpavanto Chitra Sandhaguru Vandeham Shri Ramakrishna Abhaya Charanasako Sukado Brahmananda Surya Sahapriya Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagate Gopesha Gopika Panta Radha Panta Namaste Dhananjana Gaurami Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suderi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai.
Hari. What's supposed to happen? Say something to the kids.
We're somebody's children. We're somebody's children.
We're awesome. Moms, good job. So last night we talked. Can I just go ahead? Try to bring the kids in. I usually have a little something from the kids this time.
We usually have storytelling
Okay.
at my house, and we brought everyone here instead.
Okay.
So the kids they have heard they will be hearing some stories tonight.
Okay, we'll try to. In that direction. Last night we spoke about the nature of Lila, and I wanted to divide it into two discussions. One about the Prakat Lila, the manifest Lila, and went into that at some length. Any interesting points were raised. I thought, thank you for that. and I was going to speak about Apricot Lila, unmanifest Lila, but I think we'll shift course here and enter into some examples of the Prakat Lila from Bhagavatam, of course. And then I want to go to the 15th chapter of the 10th canto. And this is as I mentioned last night, the Bhagavatam has really three primary aesthetic centers within the 10th canto, which is the center field, centerfold of the book. And that is the Vatsalya Rasa center, which involves the chapters surrounding the Damodar Lila, 8 through 8, 9, 10, something like that. Then you have the Sakya Rasa center, beginning with 11 and a half, and then Brahma Mohan Lila, all the way up to the 18th chapter. Then you have the Madhya Rasa center in the 5 chapters of Rasa 29 to 35. So these are really concentrated areas, or centers within the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam in the Braj Lila, which covers the greater portion of the 10th canto. I mean, it's about 90 chapters and 40, I believe 47 about the Braj Lila. So, and as we pointed out last night, really properly understood, read it correctly, to help with good association, we come to the conclusion that the descriptions of the material Lila, the Dwarka Lila, are all primarily for reflecting back on the significance of the Braj Lila, where the book is really inviting us to enter. So these three centers I'm mentioning are all in the Braj Lila. And there we have Krishna as son of Yasoda, Krishna as a cowherd boy, Krishna as the lover of the gopis, or centers of spiritual emotion arising out of elders, equals, and lovers. All of them have the corresponding object of love. Krishna as the Kumar, Krishna as the Foganda, childhood, boyhood, and Kishore, adolescence. So tonight we will go to the center of the Sakya Rasa center of those chapters, which is the 15th chapter. It's In my book I'm writing on this topic of fraternal love. I've written 4 separate chapters, 4.5 chapters, drawn from this one chapter. So we were talking last night about how the Prakat Lila itself, in one sense, properly understood, is not per se the historical, if you will, Krishna, that you can gather some archaeological, historical, literary evidence as to his earthly presence, but rather the reflections upon that on the part of Theosophy, Samadhi and Nusvara, the Vicheshtitam, the direction of Nard. He went into Samadhi. So Bhagavatam is the Samadhi Vasha. It's not written in Sanskrit, but in language of Samadhi, which means he's trying to express his Samadhi. So his reflections on Krishna Lila, and within that meditation, in that realm, we don't have any problem with all the miracles that they can all occur there very easily. Just like the physical realm, it's difficult to do some things. If I asked you to take everything in this room outside, one of you, in one trip, what can you say? I can do it in my mind if I try. Physically, it would be possible, right? The mind is bigger. There are more possibilities in the mental world. As Prabhupada used to say, well, the physical world, the objective world, you can have gold and you can have a mountain, but you can't have a golden mountain. But in the world of the mind, you can. So it's bigger, more expansive. Intellect becomes more expansive, and then, of course, the Atma is trying to bust out of all of this. And it's bigger than smaller than the tip of the hair, but bigger in capacity. It's inert stuff, mind, senses, body, mind, intellect, Purvas. So that the Bhagavatam, there we find, in a sense, the full idea of the Prakat Lila. And if you don't take birth in the Prakat Lila, which is thought to be the normal course, you can do as well by entering pages of the Bhagavatam. I only emphasize that. To live in the text. And some of you may have thought, oh, I kind of read the Bhagavatam, I've heard the stories before, and it's not that easy to live there, and so forth. Therefore, it's very important to note that when we emphasize that along with it, we have to emphasize the other Bhagavat. So we have 2 Bhagavats, the book Bhagavat and the devotee Bhagavat, the person Bhagavat. In his second of 2 Namaskar verses, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Shri Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Mahashaya, he informs us, commenting on the second verse, Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahoito Bodily Pushpavanto Chitro Sambotananda. Among other things, he has a fairly extensive commentary, and among other things he says, and that giving, that dough, that giving of grain that he gives, there's a way, there's a medium through which it's given. The verse, of course, says, Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Saha Odito, together, the 2 rising like Pushpavanto, like it's unbelievable. He's saying their appearance in the world as if the sun and the moon were rising at the same time. He's trying to give us some idea so that we won't blink and pay attention. Something extraordinary has happened. And although we weren't there, and let me read the Chaitanya Bhagavat. we can feel Vrindavandas Thakur's real feeling that he missed it by half a generation. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, anyway. Oh, those are the real wealth of such books, where the authors just can't help but express their hearts. They're just writing about it, and their feelings just surface. And what does Goswami say? Buddhishamrita. Rati Patirinati.
Guhyamakati Prichati.
Guhyamakati. Guhyam Akati Prichati. To share their hearts. Such a we find it in Chaitanya Charitamrita also, when Krishna's Gadadhar is speaking about Nityananda Prabhu. And he's kind of like writing, he's looking, is anyone listening? I'm being forced, driven beyond my ability to control it, to say something here about his grace, how he happened to come into my life in a special way. The result of which, of course, when he was sent by Nityananda to Vrindavan and blessed to write Chaitanya Charitamrita. As Vrindavan, that's what it says. He was blessed within a heart. Nityananda Prabhu told him to write this book. So, anyway, in Krishnadas's book, Chaitanya Charitamrita, when writing about him, this is one of his namaskar verses to Gauratai, the principal deity, presiding deities of this book, if you will, the samasti gurus of the sampradaya. They're the macrocosmic manifestation of Guru Tattva, and thereafter, in succession, in so many streams, parivars of Gaudiya, the dissemination of Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and yet microcosmic manifestations of Guru Tattva. The small Guru is the big Guru. We may think, why should I get the small Guru? I will go to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and say, I will be a disciple of Nityananda Prabhu. Pujapachita Marshman gave an example. If you take a telescope and you want to look at the stars, and you see on the one end there's a big lens, and the other end is a small lens. Why should I look through the small one? I look through the big lens. You'll just get headache then. Look through the small one, then later one, and then you see the moon. All that's going on, all the rasa there. So anyway, he says he wants us to pay attention, because imagine he's going to say, if the sun and the moon appeared at the same time, they came like this together. Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sori Odadai Pushpavantu Chitro Chitro Samdo Tamondo Samdo Tamondo. They got rid of negative, and samdo they gave praying. Praying. Dharma projita kaitava paramolo nematsaranam. Kaitava. They did away with that. And all religion or spiritual orientation based on getting something. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Rejecting that and giving praying. So that's what he says. And then he says how they gave that praying. Right? So we need to read his commentary on his own verse. And he says they gave it through two Bhagavats. This is their way. Through the Grantaraj, Paramamsa Samhidam, Srimad Bhagavatam, Amalam, Puranam, Yad Vaishnavanam Priyam. Great Srimad Bhagavatam. Through that, and the person Bhagavatam, who's living in the Bhagavatam. There was a time, fortunately it didn't last too long, after the departure of Prabhupada, my Guru Maharaj from the world, that this was well intended, and feeling his absence, but lacking keen spiritual insight and scriptural understanding, some of my God brothers, God sisters, came to the interesting conclusion that, well, Prabhupada is gone, but his books are here, and he's in his book. So there's two Bhagavatas. Prabhupada is the person Bhagavatam, and in his book is the Bhagavatam. So the person is not here, but we got the book, so all we need is the book. We don't need any more of these gurus, and was the thinking. But this is not what Krishna has said. And they say, well, they had the Prabhupada, and then they had it. Well, yes, I guess you could say, if you can find him there, that's not so easy. The Shastra, the Bhagavatam as a text, which Sridhar Maharaj described as a passive agent of divinity. And the Guru or the Sadhu as an active agent. In other words, the book can't ask you when you're reading, so did you understand? And it's not an easy book to read. So I recommend that you live in the Bhagavatam, and it's not that easy to read. Its language is not even a spoken language anymore, for the most part, Sanskrit. And it's a complicated language. And it's poetic, and it's voluminous. We talked a little bit about different elements that are in the Bhagavatam that are less essential than others, how to sort all this out, and so forth. So the person Bhagavatam, that will be essential in order to help us live within the Bhagavatam and draw from it continually. Draw from the fountain. Bring the Bhagavatam itself is like an outline. And all the Goswami's texts are drawing from the Bhagavatam. That's the center, the core. And the flow of the Lila in their Lila Granthas, for example, it's all based on the Bhagavatam. But you're finding things that's not written in the text of the Bhagavatam. It's there. It's there, but you couldn't find it. Is there, you tell me, is there ghee in milk? There is. Can you find it? There's a way to find that. It's there. The average person doesn't even know what ghee is. It's there. You have to turn it into butter, you turn the butter into ghee. Therefore, that's an important point, of course, for us, because we get that we're going to describe Krishna the cowherder and his extraordinary qualities, and symptoms, characteristics, and bodily markings, and so on and so forth. Peculiar markings of an avatar and Mahaparusha. What's peculiar about them? They're appearing in a mere cowherd. Doesn't register as much with us, but in India, cowherd is not, where you're in their midst, where you would think a saintly divine person, a divinity, an avatar would necessarily appear, right? And Ram, it makes little sense. He was a prince, king, so forth. Buddha was a son of the king also. But I don't think that the cowherds are lowly. No, we should not think, because they are taking care of the camels, and in the cows, from the cows we get milk, and from milk we get ghee, and from there the sacrifice comes. So he is Yajabuk. He is the same person that Brahma's worshipping in Brahmaloka. Yajabuk, who you open the door, offer something, close it, he goes to sleep, open it, offer something, hope he accepted it. And then Brahma, no one Lila, Brahma sees him eating in his left hand. Is that the, how can that be the Yajabuk? He tries to put it together. So to understand the Bhagavad, to live in that, you need good association. So, someone might say, for example, I have begun by saying that I'm going to talk from this 15th chapter, and that in the book I'm on, I've written 4 chapters from this chapter. So I have been asked, well, where'd you get that information? Where'd you get that? Somebody said, you must have studied commentary. I said, of course. That goes without saying, right? It goes without saying. Take the commentaries. And who has the interest in the subject to do that, to pour over and something and so forth. It might speak to such to him or her. This is the nature of such literary work. When Jayadeva Goswami wrote in Gita Govinda, what is the verse? And Krishna vows to touch the feet of Radha. And then, did I say that? Did I actually say that? I've written that there. It was indelible, it couldn't be erased. So, something like that. So we should expect that. The purport is more important than the verse. Probably one said about his Gita, he said, I think, I forget who he mentioned it, somebody take somebody else's translation, use that, and then just get on with here, and then add my purports. And then he said, well, no, probably that would be plagiarism. Probably somebody makes Krishna's words. Of course, they don't have, Indian writers and sadhus don't have the same sensibilities about modern journalism and authorship and so forth as we do. But the point was well taken on his part. And his main emphasis was the purport's more important than the verse. How the verse makes me feel. And if on top of that, I or he or whoever she has good character, and then how the verse, the text, the chapter makes them feel, that is real. What we want, right? So there's a lot anyway in this chapter. Certainly have exhausted. It's mined all the jewels there, but it's a very rich section. As I say, it is the center of the Sakya-rasa center, and we'll see why as we proceed here. Forgive me for the long introduction. Verse. Tas chapoganda vyashitovachi bahuvatusto pashuparasamutun kascharayanto sakivi samantavara vrindavan bhumimati. I'm going to, if we get through it, I'm going to go through the first 3 verses, which is the introduction to the chapter. That's followed by 6 verses that constitute a eulogy on the part of Krishna, a eulogy of his older brother, Balaram. It's spoken in Hasiras, which is the best friend of Sakiras. Hasiras means the comedic rasa, joke telling. So there's a eulogy of Balaram that follows these first 3 verses, just to go in an outline of the chapter. And the humor is very subtle on the part of Krishna and very deep. He speaks there with some Ganjana, like implied meaning, saying one thing, but meaning something else at the same time. 2 different things on 2 different levels. So to draw that out, you say to pay attention, right? From there, there's a brief description of the general activities of the Poganda Lila. This chapter is an overview of the Poganda Lila beginning. That means Krishna's boyhood, from childhood to boyhood, and a general overview of this Poganda culminating in Kishore. Via Sandhi, the beginning of the sun, the Sandhyam, the junction between Poganda boyhood and Kishore adolescence. The end of the chapter, Krishna's coming into his adolescence, and this is brought out for the first time in the Bhagavatam. Another very beautiful section. So we have the introductory verses, the eulogy of Balaram, the description of the general activities of Poganda, which carries us into this actual slaying of Dhenukasura, the chapter is named after. Slaying of Dhenukasura. And then coming out on the other end, the chapter begins going into the forest with the cows and ending coming back. It doesn't constitute a description of one particular day, but just the feelings of Sukadev about Poganda in general and entering into Kishore. In fact, at the end of the chapter, and we'll get to this on another day, hopefully, when the description of Krishna, just a couple of verses, is Kishore is coming out. We find the first example of Purvarag in Bhagavatam. It means feelings of separation between Krishna and the gopis as a result of feeling love for one another, but not for the first time, not being able to express it. And in that, right in that section, Sukadev Goswami, in the context of his kirtan, which is his means, right, of the different angas of bhakti, Rupa Goswami gives examples of different persons who, by focusing on one particular anga, became perfect, became siddhas. So, Parikshit Maharaj, by Shravana, who became perfect by kirtan. So this is the Purana type of Puranic narration. Of course, it's the Bhagavad Purana, Amar Purana. So yeah, right at the end of this chapter, he enters in this Sarup city in Gopi Bhav. So it's a very exciting chapter. And then after that, there are some introductory verses to the next chapter, which is, of course, the chastisement of Korea, which also occurs during Poganda. Why it came afterwards, why he spoke it, and tried to say it a few words and put a lid on it and not continue with that, that's a whole other interesting explanation. We'll have to come to of course, in the year here. It's a long sort of discussions. But here today, the first, now we've heard at least the Sanskrit of it, verse of 3 introductory verses to this important, interesting, significant chapter. Tatascha Poganda. So after that, tatas means now what we have heard just prior to this is a very extensive discussion of the last part, we could say the Seish Kumar, the last phase of Krishna's Kumar Lila, childhood Lila, in which he has become, in that phase, a calf herder, not a cow herder, but a calf herder, which means he can go out with the calves only so far and come back not too late. Not yet been blessed with getting permission to herd the big cows, right? And of course, in the Brahma Mohan Lila, where this calf herding begins, that we mentioned this a little bit yesterday, it's very significant point of Krishna's Tu Bhagavan Swayam, this Paribhas Sutra of the Bhagavatam is played out in the Lila narrative. And Brahma sees that Krishna is the source of everything, of all the Narayans, all the world. So after that, the thus. That's it. In that chapter, it's like, what more could be said? Huh. There's more. So thus after that now it means also with this word means the end of the Kumar Lila. So thus Japoganda Vaya, Poganda Vaya, the age of Poganda, of boyhood. Trito Braje was attained in Braj. Braje means in Braj. Significance of this here is that, interestingly, that Poganda, the childhood age of Krishna, which is where he begins wearing a peacock feather, for example. So it's a very interesting, we'll go into it a little bit of age, but it only occurs in Braj. So in Braj, Poganda Braje Trito. Poganda Vaya, what is it? Trito Braje. So in Braj you attain. In Braj you attain, it means this. So this is a speciality of the Poganda age. Of course, we can say it's a speciality of the Kumar age also of Krishna. It only occurs in Braj. Kishore, which is special, even more so in some respects. But it's also found in Mathura. It's also found in Dwarka because Krishna never ages beyond Kishore. So the Poganda is a specialty of Braj, and yes, Kumar is also, but the excellences of the Kumar age are also found in his Kishore age, in his Poganda age. And in the middle of his Poganda age, here's the beginning, but in the middle of it, some Kishore sensibilities also start to manifest. Or a case can be made from the heart of Sakyabhav for the excellence of the Poganda age. And although all three of these ages are udipanas or excitants, excitants for Sakyarasa. Excitants means like, I'm sure he loves his daughter, Lila, right? Always. But if she's gone for a long time and then he comes home and he sees her shoes at the outside the door, and that love swells to his heart. Right? She's here. She came back. So the shoes are the Udipana Vibhav. That combined with other bhavas, of course, causes this the ocean of his Sthayi Bhav, this example, love for his daughter, to rise up and become rasa. That's all there is in this case, the idea. So, just a brief description of what is an Udipana Vibhav. So there are many of them. And for Sakya Rasa, and there are different ones for Bhaktali Rasa, Madhurya Rasa, and so on and so forth. And some overlapping and whatnot, but all three ages. Because again, in the Kumar age, last part at least, he's a calf herder. So what is Poganda? Poganda means is that period in one's life when one's center of love is shifting from the parents to the friends. And confidence now is with the friends, not with the parents. We have to hide some things with them at that stage. So, and parents, what's going on? What are they up to? At least Krishna has nice friends. At least he comes to nice friends. Hang out with. He's got Vrishabhanu son, Sridham, is his closest mate. He has good character. So on. So in the last part of his Kishore, of his Kumar, the Sage Kumar, he's herding calf. He's starting to meet his friends, right? and gather together with them, and they have their own adventures and so on and so forth. And of course, as he moves a little further into Poganda itself, and through the first part of Poganda, the middle of Poganda, well, he get to know his friends pretty well, real well. So he knows their sisters too. He's heard about them, he's seen them, he's thought about them, he's mentioned them, he's talked about them. And some of his friends got an ear for that. His most intimate friends, his Narmasakas. Here in this chapter, 15th chapter, hidden in here, of course, comes out that there are divisions within Sakyarasa. Of course, we prostrate ourselves at the lotus feet of Rupa Goswami, who's brought this out so beautifully in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, what he's given there about all the rasas. Four divisions. We'll get into that as it comes up in the next discussion. But those Narmasakas, they have an ear, some sympathy, they're sympathetic for Krishna's romanticism, want to assist him in that. So he knows their sisters. So there's a touch of Kishore, as I said, in the middle of his Poganda. But Poganda again is a shift from one's center of affection, from the parents to the friends. And there's a kind of confidence there amongst friends that you won't find between parents and children. Some of the kids, they think, we just can't tell them, you can't talk to dad about that, And the parents think, we can't tell them that. We can't answer that question. We shouldn't even ask that. The stork came, So there's not this is one of the unique qualities of Sakyarasa, the equality. Rupa Goswami ends his section on Sakyarasa, he says, and that's why they say this is the best, because how he feels and how I feel, two friends, how Krishna and his friend feel, how, as it comes in this verse, we'll see how Krishna and Balaram feel about one another. They both feel the same way about each other. It's equal. It's not equal how this mother feels towards the child feels towards the mother, or in Dasirasa, how the servant feels towards the master. There's a difference. So there's the argument from the Sakya perspective is this is the best because the union is more complete. We feel the same way. This is a predominant characteristic of this particular bhav, and it comes out here in the text, but I'm explaining it a little ahead of myself in the context of speaking about Poganda, right? The boyhood, the shifting of the center of affection from parents to friends, and all the implications of it. This is such a beautiful thing, you see, what we've given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's nowhere where you can find this, where you can talk about God in such a way that you can bond with him, with all of your human emotions, and then you can make a common bond. Yeah, we know what that's like, kind of. We've got some, like you take Christ, you can connect with him emotionally out of guilt. And that's a human emotion. Ooh, I'm guilty. You feel guilty, he died on the cross. Of course, we weren't there. Maybe we would have stood on it, but Judas didn't do that. So there was a movie, I didn't see it, I heard about it, and read some reviews by Mel Gibson about the
Passion of the Christ.
Passion of Christ. And it was really like, he died for you. Don't you think you should feel a little guilty for not loving him? And yeah, maybe so. I mean, it's a big thing what he did. But my point only is that it reminds me of a story. I was once in the Denver airport, and I was distributing Prophet's books, and I handed the Bhagavatam to a fellow, and he took the books, nice guy, and he said, he said, I really appreciate what you do, but I don't need your book. And I said, why is that? This is a religious book, right? And I said, yeah. He said, because in my religion, he said, we know about the emotional life of God. I knew I had him then. And I said, really? That's very interesting. And what do you know? He had a son. God has a son. He sent his son. He was talking about it in a nice way. I appreciated it. He sent his son to deliver us. And so now you have his son and send him off. This is his emotional life. He wants to save the people. He sends his son. He has him die on the cross, you know. How he feels towards his son. I guess he was thinking about that. And I said, well, that's fascinating. I said, did you know he has a wife? And a few lovers, friends, parents, all here. Yes, the emotional life of God. 2.0, you know. Here it is, he took the book. But the point I'm making is that we hear the Lila narrative of the Bhagavatam, discourse of this and so forth, and then when we hear his humanness, Krishna's humanness, and we're hearing about moving from Kumar to Puganda, and we can understand it, right? And we bond with him. This is very powerful. We're emotional beings, right? So, and of course, we want to transcend our material emotions and acquire psychological emotions, bhava, so forth. But what a beautiful way, you know, to do so, at least in the beginning sense. Our human experience, emotionally, psychologically, enables us to really connect with Krishna. Once Bhaktivinoda Narayan Maharaj questioned the name of the deities in London, in Prabhupada's temple, Radha Landanishwar. Landanishwar, you know, it's Krishna, you know. Good reason he had, you know, to question us. Kind of odd, right? Krishna's Brajendrananda, he's not even the Ishwar of anybody, right? He's touching the feet of Radha. Go back to that, you know, Landan Ishwar. But I thought, you know, yes, if Prabhupada named him Landan Ishwar, and all the London people could feel he's ours. He's ours. He belongs to us, which is the Swarup Lakshana of praying. The primary characteristic of praying is minus, M-Y-N-E-S-S, mine, possessive. He's ours. We emotionally, he's part of us. This is the Braj Lila. He's ours. Other people see him in a different way. As some sage comes here in art and falls over and bows down. Brahma comes and offers prayers through all four of his mouths and so forth. Weird. They see him differently. He's just one of us. Especially this comes out, of course, in Sakyaras. We're equals. We're equals. So in Braj, the Poganda, very special age, and of course at this point, Rupa Goswami brings out I think 17 qualities of Krishna. There's 64 qualities of Krishna that are described in Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu. In Sundarbas, Jiva Goswami elaborates on those even more. So I mean, he has unlimited good qualities, obviously, but Rupa Goswami has highlighted 64 of them. And one of the things that he's done for his discourse on Sakya Rasa that he hasn't done for the other rasas, which he also goes through, and this explains, if you will, is that he has brought out, highlighted 17 qualities of Krishna that pertain to those in Sakya Rasa. In other words, the qualities of Krishna that will stand out to someone who is moved by this sentiment. it means that in different sentiments, Madhurya Rasa, Vatsalya Rasa, you're going to see Krishna a little differently. All the qualities are there, but certainly they're going to stand out for you. In Asakti, one becomes attached in this stage of bhakti, attached to the object of love that arises out of the ruchi that comes prior. That ruchi makes a specific taste, and then the object's going to appear in a particular way. Krishna is Bodily, his course, Krishna Eulogy, so on and so forth. And interestingly, relative to the discussion about Poganda, these qualities are practically, they all come into place in Poganda. They carry over, some of them extend into Kishore as well. For example, we'll go through a few of them here. He says what? Suvesha Sara Salakshan Lakshito Balinavara Vivid Adbhuta Bhavaduk, so on. These qualities. Suvesha. So Suvesha means he's a meticulous dresser. So in his Kumar Lila, Krishna doesn't care what he wears. He's not thinking about it. His mother dresses him, tells him he should wear this, he shouldn't wear that, and so on and so forth. I remember when I was a kid getting a sweater for Christmas, and I hadn't quite entered into Poganda yet. It was a real disappointment. A sweater? So at that age, you're not concerned what you look like, right? There's mirrors don't count, right? In the Kumari, you're feeling things, you know. In Poganda, the mind intelligence starts to become, I start to think about things a little bit more, like what I look like, and so on. So in Poganda, Suvesha, he starts to dress himself. No. He says to his mother, no, I'll dress myself. So he didn't dress himself and come out, and then go check him out, Mother Yasoda, Nanda Maharaj, how he's decorated himself. Of course, in Aprapat Lila, when Krishna, he has servants and family who dress him. He's like dressed several times a day. But when he goes to Calvary, just at the end of the, after breakfast, a little rest and so forth, then his Narmasakas will come and dress him for Calvary. He has three different basic types of attire. He has a two-piece set with his lower cloth and a shutter, and that's primarily how he dresses for Calvary. So it's the rustic look, if you will. And then he has the four-piece, where he wears a lower cloth, upper cloth, might even include a vest, turban, and a shawl. For more formal occasions, like in the evening, coming for the evening entertainment, and so forth. And then he has another deep artistic dress that is even more elaborate for different occasions. We find in his Poganda Lila, which the slaying or chastising Kali is also found, that when he stood on the head of Kaliya, he straightened his clothes out. Prabhupada, I think, uses an example of he's a meticulous dresser. And his friends they're all appreciating that. That's cool. And as I said, it's an Narmasakas, the dressing amongst the sakas at that time, before he goes to Kahori, dressing him every morning. Sarvasala Lakshita Lakshanvita. So another quality, another example. This means he has auspicious bodily characteristics. It's mentioned here in the verse also. Gash Charayam Tosaki Bisamantadaya. That he he's in Braj, he's entered into Poganda age, and he is beautifying Vrindavan with his footprints. The implication is that prior to his Poganda, he didn't weigh enough to make much of an imprint. And his feet were so small that the distinguishing characteristics on the bottom of his feet, the Sarvasala Lachanvita, means auspicious bodily qualities, and they're divided into two things: his feet and the markings on them, and other parts of his body. So on his feet are small, so that all these distinct lines had not developed enough with the growth of his feet to make imprints. And of course, when he goes cow herding, this is now in the Poganda Lila, he begins to herd cows instead of calves, right? Which takes us, of course, to the Gopastami. There's a whole chapter, right? Now, that's the story we should tell the kids, but now they're gone. Sorry about that. So, herding, point is, you won't wear shoes because the cows don't wear shoes. And this is a part of the herdsman's perspective. You have to be like them, as much as possible. Bond with them so he doesn't wear shoes, he leaves his footprints. And the footprints, they stay. In spite of the fact that there's thousands of cows, they move around them. That's how Balaram followed the footprints and led everybody from Kalila, because he was at home. Krishna skipped out and chastised Kalila, got caught in the coils, and there were earthquakes and tremors and meteors and inauspicious signs, and everyone turned around. What to do? He just smiled. Sukadeva thought, why are you smiling? Bhagavad. Of course, different reasons for that. But anyway, he took everybody following the footprints. How would footprints could be there? Because the cows walked around them. But the forest covers them over when need be. What is that art that you teach?
Tracking?
Yeah. What's it called?
Outdoor.
Oh,
Outdoor skills.
Leave no trace.
Oh, leave no
Leave no
trace.
trace.
Leave no trace.
Leave no trace. So when does he leave no trace? When does the forest, which is alive in service to Krishna, cover the footprints? When he goes to Chandravali's going to bed, you better cover those up. Now we'll go in the direction of Madhurya Rasa. Okay. These different auspicious bodily characteristics, of course, they're very well known to the cowherds. These footprints, they're seeing them every day. They massage his feet, so forth, his body, and they're very extraordinary. I mean, there's this idea of the auspicious bodily characteristics that mark like a Mahaparusha has coming out of Hinduism, has extended into Jainism, also into Buddhism. In Buddhism, they have the idea that for each quality, auspicious bodily characteristics, this is physiognomy, right? For each auspicious bodily characteristic, in order to have it, you have to have done 100 meritorious works in the previous life and had 100 meritorious thoughts before performing that act for each characteristic. And so for them to appear, all of them, in a cowherd is very peculiar. I mentioned this earlier. But he has such bodily characteristics, and these are all, again, the footprints are a good example, coming out largely in his Poganda Lila. So among the qualities that Jiva Rupa Goswami has highlighted, there are a few others. Balinambara, Vidira Bhutta, Varshadit, Babaduk. Balinambara, his strength. So who sees his strength? Very closely tied, as is Hasyaras to Sakyaras, is what was it called? Yudavira. Yudavira is Hasya Rasa, they're secondary rasas. So they have the power at times to take precedence over the primary rasa, which recedes to the background. So Yudavira is like play fighting amongst friends, mock fighting, wrestling, so on and so forth. So it's very particular to Sakya. So the strength of Krishna. Balidambara, strong amongst best of the strong. Yeah. They witness, we may wonder, Krishna killed this demon, that demon, these stories are all fantastic. Don't think like that. That's what Saliras. Don't go there. They think must be exaggeration. How is it possible? Cowards, they're written something, right? Especially in the Prakat Lila. Of course, they don't think that much of it because they think, and they're right, they could have done the same thing. These are special people. Just to give an example, by the time we went Gopa Kumar in his trajectory towards Narmasakabhav himself, he gets waylaid in Vaikuntha. And before he meets Narayan, he meets other devotees in Narayan, Sarupya Mukti. They have forms like Narayan. They're like he's never seen anyone like that. And he's awed. He thinks this must be Narayan. I don't know why. He's got the Srivas on. A couple of markings that distinguish him from everybody else. Just in a way of making the point here, but it's to a greater extent. The equality that is sensed amongst the friends of Krishna with him. And they're right. They could have killed the demons, but Lila Shakti doesn't allow that to happen. So that we can know the speciality of Krishna. And he mentioned here what that Buddha, he speaks all kinds of languages. They have the experience of this, right? He speaks to the animals in their own native language. So this is common in the forest, and in his speech is very eloquent also. So these qualities, for example, speech is obviously something that's not relative to Kumar. In Kumar, it's you don't even get out a straight, sentence. Oh, he said Krishna. Say it again. But in Poganda, then not only speaking, but when it really starts to come on, this is very beautiful for the parents, of course. He says something profound. He starts to talk like an adult. How charming. He has an opinion. Whoa, okay. So again, the point here, only in brief, is that people with these qualities that Rupa Goswami has highlighted that are particularly served as Udipanas for Sakyarasa, among other Udipanas, are all largely arising in Kishore, Poganda, and they extend some of them also, of course, into Kishore. So anyway, Poganda. I'll say, let me just read something from Jiva Goswami and conclude this section here on that I like very much on Poganda. He says, Gopal Chandra, as Krishna and Balaram reached Poganda, their intelligence increased. The luster of their black and white complexions defeated that of their Kumar period. Their chests expanded, their eyes elongated toward their ears, and their limbs also became longer. Their hairdos and manner of dressing became more elaborate. They became skillful at learning new varieties of play, and their overall affection increased. So soft is their boyhood as it first emerges. I feel a great longing to see them in this way. Jiva Goswami, Prabhupada. It's worth noting, footnote, that Jiva Goswami, of course, is steeped in Manjari Bhav, the excellence of Madhurya Rasa, a particular type of Madhurya Rasa. It's very central to Gaudiya Vaishnavism. But as a youth growing up, he worshipped Krishna Balaram deities. So you can find more than any amongst any other of the seminal and founding acharyas of the Sampradaya in Manjari Bhav, in who are in Manjari Bhav, in Jiva Goswami. He expresses here and there some special feeling for Krishna and Balaram and their Kavat pastimes. Indeed, he goes a little far in preaches and Darby says, and the gopis of Braj, their Madhuryas mixed with Sakya. There's no explanation. That's what big subject. So, Poganda. Tadascha Poganda, Vayashvita Vijay, and Bahuvatasto, Pashu, Parasammato. He says Bahuvatasto. So, this is in the plural, so he's speaking about Krishna and Balaram both. So it's significant because in Poganda, as Krishna comes to Poganda, then the prominence of Balaram starts to come out. Prior to that, he's the elder brother. Yashoda is always pressing her Vatsalya on him. You should protect it. You should protect it. You're the older brother. You're the guru of the family. When Nanda's not here, you should take care of it. She's like fostering this Vatsalya Bhava. Of course, he has Vatsalya in some of his emotional composition. He is an example of Sankul Bhava. In other words, he's in Sakya Rasa, but it's packaged together with Dasya and Vatsalya. So sometimes to a lesser degree, he'll experience some Dasya and Vatsalya. Well, primarily he's defined by his Sakya Bhava. But she presses on that Vatsalya component of his Sankul Bhava. And when it comes to Poganda, it starts to make sense. Krishna's going to go down with it again. Who's going to take care of him? Who's the older one here? And so forth. So also what's being said here is by Sukadeva Goswami is using the plural in describing the two of them. He wants to say that the two of them are equal. And in the following section, when Krishna gives the eulogy of Balaram, this very much comes out. They're equal in tattva, but they're also equal, interestingly, in emotion. As I said earlier, in Sakya Rasa, they have equal emotion to one another. They're emotionally equal, and they're philosophically, if you will, in terms of tattva, they're equal. At the same time, of course, they're emotionally different. But only if we look at it through the lens of Madhurya Rasa. Then we find some emotional. In Sakya, from the vantage point of Sakya only, they're equal emotionally and in tattva, in bhava and in tattva. But through the lens of Madhurya, which some of the sakas have the influence of on their bhava, the Narma sakas, then it's emotional difference, his romanticism. Yes, Balaram grows up, he has gopis also of his own, but they're not the center of his life. Don't think like that. The center of Balaram's life is his friendship with Krishna. His romanticism with gopis is a secondary thing only. We look at Balaram through the lens of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Rag Marg, that is his Sakya Bhav. His Gopi Bhav, that is Maryada. There's no Parakiya for Balaram. Yes, he danced with the gopis at Ramghat, chastised the Jamuna and so forth. But he did it at the request of Krishna, then further pressed by Radha, and further then authorized by Nanda Maharaj. When Krishna sent Balaram to Vrindavan to minister to his devotees there and reassure them that he was coming, He said, and by the way, when you're there, marry those gopis who had a crush on you during the holy Lila. Remember them? You should marry them. Yeah. All right. Krishna said, so when he arrived there, then he meets with the different devotees. Ultimately, he meets with the gopis, Krishna's gopis. He ministers to them. They're pacified to some extent, much more than Uddhava could pacify. What are you talking about? Uddhava was sent to pacify, but ostensibly, but after he was sent, as we discussed a little bit last night, he was sent to find out where life picks up and scripture leaves off, beyond the Upanishads. What does Jiva Goswami say? Shrutam api Upanishadam dure harikatamita. Those sounds of the Upanishads. Tattvam asi, aham brahmasmi, neti, neti. Jiva Goswami says, they're like jewels that have light, but all their light, properly understood, is shining on one sound made of two syllables. What does that sound? Krishna, Krishna. Jiva Goswami says this in Bhakti Sundara. Shrotam api Upanishadam dure harikatamita. The light that you can get from the Upanishadic sounds, dure harikatama, is very far from where you can get to harikata, kampashu pulakadaya, all these sarkavas, all these translated. It's a world of ecstasy, a world of bhavas, not a world of peace. We get that from the Upanishads. Shanti, shanti, shanti. We want peace. What else? Love. Peace and love. We want both, not just peace. So, Balaram, this is a feature of the Poganda Lila. He comes to prominence, and of course, in this chapter, it'll really come out. There's a eulogy of Krishna, glorifying Balaram in the forest, and then it's followed by the Lila that very much stays with Balaram throughout. In other words, he liberates the tall fruits from Denikasura. The tall fruit, of course, is a particular palm, and that fruit, if left for a couple of days, will turn alcoholic. The name of it, Latin name for that. And Balaram has a little bit of a penchant for that, and this Lila very much characterizes it, because even in his mature early living, the Dwarka Lila becomes a prince along with Krishna. He has a chariot. He has a flag. What's on the flag? That tall palm. So it's a very defining Lila for Balaram. Of course, we're not going to go into that. So that's another chapter to bring out of this chapter, right? It's the center part of the chapter in one sense, the slaying of Denikasura, and the cowards pushing on the ego of Balaram. You're the older brother who hadn't seen it yet. Krishna's killed so many demons, so I went to view them. Mother Yasoda says, Krishna should be cared for by you. Rama, Rama, Mahabhaho. You've got big arms, but you never use them. They pinch you, off they go. That's a beautiful story around here. But the point here, of course, in this verse at the onset here is that the two of them, that the Balaram, that there's in Poganda Lila now, Balaram so we have the slave of Denikasura, Pralambasura, another very big event in Balaram's life, so forth. And Gascharayam Dosi will be someone for that. So again, in this verse, then one of the jewels we pull out of it is the whole Gopastami, because it says here, he began to herd cows. Gash Charayanto. He began herding cows. Sakihisamam. Along with his friends. Samam means along with his friends, and it means with his equals. together. It's again central to the spirit of Sakyaras, the feeling of it. They began to herd cows. So the herding of cows is a big event. For Krishna to graduate from calf herding to cow herding has a lot of implications because, as I said earlier, when he's herding calves, he can only go so far. He has to come back early. When he's taking out the cows, well, they need to stay out longer. And now the sky's the limit, right? And they're curious creatures, so they're going to wander from forest to forest to forest, not just close by. So this is so now the tension begins between Vatsalya Rasa and Madhurya Rasa. It already started a little bit. It was cute at first, but now it's getting serious. So for Mother Yasoda to let go, she's the pinnacle of Vatsalya Rasa. For her, she's the last to let go. And it's mentioned here that Bahuvarasto, Pashupalasamvato, they got permission for their Gashcharayanto, for herding cows. So this is a big, build up, right? And this is a reference to Gopasami, which is a particular astrological day in the life of Krishna. I've told the story of Gopasami before. I can't go into it at length here, but a good part of it is this tension between Vatsalya and Sakyarasa. Krishna's friends arrive ostensibly with permission to herd cows, led by Sri Ram. It means Rishabhanu Maharaj. He's given permission. Of course, that's what it's told. But he's been told, after he's been told, well, if Krishna gets permission, then you can go. So for you, I make no profit. Cowards, they can exaggerate things. Both their Vaishya temperament and their boyhood, right? They can exaggerate and stretch the truth a little bit. It's okay. So of course, they all arrive, and prior to that, Krishna's now suddenly starting to spend more time with his uncles. And whenever Nanda Maharaj comes, they shut up. You were talking, I come over and it was quiet, what's going on? To the younger of Nanda's brothers who come out and say, of course, here's what it's all about. They have a good way of working him through it. None is opposed to the idea that Krishna will herd cows. I mean, he has so many cows and he's the king of the cowherds, so he has so many assistants. And there's so many other boys. Why his boy has to do that? Right? He's holding back, but his younger brothers, they're very smart. So they say that you're older now. How glorious it will be if your son is herding cows. And so they start to bring him this side, and this way they convert him and get him converted. Meanwhile, of course, as I say, the cowards have arrived and they're ready to go because this was talked about the night before. We're going. And so they got some plan, and Mother Yasoda can feel it. What are you doing there at the door? Come on in, come in here. So talk with them, and so that they start to make their case, and she's not having it, right? There's different signals, hand movements and movements of the eyebrows, and they toss the ball from Sridham to Sudam, and then Sudam says, well, that's fine. We understand your son, is who he is. He's the son of Nanda Maharaj. He doesn't have to go, but we have to go. And so our parents have told us, so we're off. That's how they throw the ball to Krishna. So now Krishna has to speak up. So he'll make his case. So it's why you should go. You are the son of the king, and so you don't have to do that. He says, Mother, does a Brahmin boy let someone else chant his mantras for him? How is that? He starts to speak like this about Dharma, and like to see the child start to speak like an adult, and be religious, a good religious boy. So she starts to break, but she'll come back. I said, well, fine, but what does the elder brother say? She's trying to answer. And suddenly, by the arrangement of God, he appears on the scene, right, with Rahini. There he is. And he says, no one will harm him. In my presence, it's not possible. So all of this fatherhood, if you will, that she's been fostering on him, now he brings it out. So she's again starting to cave, but she's holding up and resisting and puts her final argument. Still, Guru Dev, you're the oldest son. What will Goparaj Nanda say? We have to get his permission. So she's catches her breath, if you will. And meanwhile, Nanda's coming from the cow pen, and now he's all charged up. And my son's going to be a cowherd, and it's going to be glorious for me and the family. And I think it's good, I'm with it, So he arrives, and she lays the case before him, and of course he comes and he says, what does he say? He says,
Krishna.
Yeah.
It made Krishna something. I don't remember.
May
Krishna
May
bestowed.
Krishna bless you. And all of them, all the cowboys, they start snickering. And he says, oh, don't you understand why I named my son Krishna? It is to name your son after a name of God. That's very auspicious. Krishna is actually a name for God. There's a form of Narayan also named Krishna. And Govinda too. So and then he says, so sit down, let me tell you. Well, they're all ears. I tell you a story from the Puranas. Then he tells them, what story? Ajamil. What is the power of naming a son after God? What is the power of the name of God? So they're all ears to hear, because nobody tells the Puranic stories like Nanda Maharaj. When he speaks to the cowherds, usually in the evening, he'll speak with them. And the daily Lila, he'll speak with them and tell them a tale, referring to some Purana, and they are just all ears. And his piety and the insights that he adds to the story, and he's the ideal cowherdsman. And they are cowherd boys, wanted to be cowherdsmen. They're just, you should think he's my father. Nanda's my father. You should bond with him. So he tells him the story of Ajamil and the virtues of Nam Kirtan, and they all burst into Kirtan, singing, dancing, chanting Krishna's names, and the names of Ram and so forth. And then settle down, bring Krishna on the lap. So you want to become a cowherd? Are you sure you can do that? Krishna gives his assurance and so forth. And Nanda's about to just cave in. He says, but we have to pick an auspicious day for the occasion. So call the astrologer. Call the local astrologer, bring him in, and have him do the chart and see what's the auspicious day. So they bring him in and said, I want to do the chart and see which is the day that my son can begin herding cows. And he says, what? I want you to do the chart and see the day that is my son is auspicious for my son to go, to travel and start herding cows. He says, you want to know what? So again, he speaks loud, and he's realized he's deaf. He's hard of hearing. So he tries again, louder. And then he says, the astrologer says, oh, you want to know the day for the older son's marriage? That what it is? Oh, no. This goes on back and forth quite a bit. And then with frustration, Nanda puts a cowherd on each ear, and they both shout in his ear, "What's the day for Krishna?" And they're herd cows and in his chart. So of course, finally he gets it, right? And then he checks the chart right there, and it's today. Today. And he says, and on this day, Krishna will meet the love of his life also. And Krishna just trembles. And Subal holds his hand. Not everybody heard that part. He's hard of hearing, but when he said this, only a couple people, Krishna and Subal, heard that. So that's another part of the story, but off they go, as it said here. Herding cows on Gopastami, which is the 12th day of the bright moon in the month of Kartik. Good time to meet Radhika as well. So that's one of three. The other two verses, we'll just go through them quickly. Come to a conclusion here. Let's see here. Tamaro venam udirayam vito gope vinapir swayasho bhavambita pashum puraskritya pashavyama vishad vihat dukama kushamakaram. At that place, where the pasture meets the forest, which is the implication here, it's kind of a little report into the translation, which is well known yet inexpressibly glorious, the forests of Vrindavan. The implication of this is that Krishna is entering into the forest. He who is spring personified, Madhava, surrounded by cowards, singing his glories, chanting kirtan, accompanied by Balaram. So again, Balaram is again mentioned, emphasized his role, his prominence in Bhagavad Lila. They place the animals in front, enter the forest, filled with flowers for nourishing the cows, while playing his flute. So he's playing his flute, he's awakening all the whole forest that he's coming, right? And they're all responding to him as if it's spring, although it's October, right? As if it's spring. This is the magic of the forests of Vrindavan. They can show the specialty of any season, in any season, or all of the seasons in one forest at one time, and so forth, all under the direction of Vrindadevi. So we won't go into it in length here, but Krishna blows his flute. Madhava name, Madhava also means spring. Madhava also means, if there's Madhava, there has to be Radha. Madhava is the goddess, the husband of the goddess of fortune, Madhava. So if you're going to mention Madhava, then Radha's got to be nearby, right? So this is an indication here at the onset of this chapter, this is the second verse, that this chapter is going to take us from the Poganda up to and into the Kishore Lila, as I mentioned. This Poganda Lila goes from Krishna's 6th year to his 8th year. Of course, different acharyas have said different things, but that's the broader consensus. Typically, he would have started earlier, but because of what happened during the Brahma Vimohan Lila, a year was lost in Kumar for the boys that had been stolen by Brahma, or appeared to be stolen, but weren't operative by the arrangement of the Shakti. And so they got an extra year. And then Poganda begins, instead of at 5, it's beginning at 6, 7, up to Rasa Lila, 8. And within that, again, there is the touch of Kishore. So this epithet for Krishna is invoked here to tell us that. And it's mentioned here how the forest is responding also, as if to say, cow herding is not always that easy. They're big animals, and they're not always. They don't just go, come Callie. Yeah, they're not like that. Particularly, and you want to go in one direction, especially a calf, they'll definitely go in the other direction, and so on. So it's a challenge, but the forest is responding. The implication of the verse here is in such a way as to say, and don't worry, all you have to do is play, because we will furnish the cows with everything they need, and they're happy, easy to herd. The work will be done by us, and you will simply play. This is the implication here, this verse. Second, and then the third verse. Tan manjuru shalimrita bijakulam mahanmanaha prakya payasarasvata vatena dushtam shatapatra gandhina niriksharam tumbam. The woodland was teeming with sweet sounding bees, deer, and birds. It was served by a breeze that had a fragrance of lotuses that was related to the lake, in which the water was clear, like the minds of great sages observing the forest. Bhagavan made up his mind to play. So the further idea is basically the idea all of his senses were served by the sound and the breeze and the fragrance and so forth by the forest. And they created a perfect environment for his herding and covered playful Lilas of Sakyas and Bhagavan. Shri Krishna, Jai. Yes, there is Bhagavan to remind us this is God. After all, we said, we just keep that in mind. So, any question?
Yes.
Yes.
So, just for clarification, Krishna doesn't meet with Radhika at nights till he gets to the Kaishorya age. In Paganda age, they don't have like interactions as common as later on. Is my understanding correct?
Yeah, there's some contact in Kishore. And there are many meetings, first meetings of Radha and Krishna, experienced by different poets, different rasikas, different times, but in Paganda, first meetings, told in this way, told in that way. But in Bhagavatam itself, then as I said at the end of this chapter, Purvarag is first introduced, and Krishna's entering into his Kishore Lila, and yes, ultimately in the Kishore Lila, then that becomes a central part of Krishna's daily and nightly affairs, and of course, he's accompanied in that by certain friends who are sympathetic to his romantic life and want to assist him in that. It's the correct understanding.
Also, I was wondering, is Krishna spending nights with cows and cowboys in the forest sometimes, or he always goes back to Vrindavan to Mother Yashoda?
Yeah, cows have to come home. Hour of cow dust. That's Bodily. Come home. So he brings them home, and there's milking, and there's bathing and dressing, and there's arti performed by Madhu Mangal for Nishringadev, the house of Nanda Maharaj. There's then afterwards there's some discussion. Like I said, Nanda Maharaj speaking to the boys while the cooking is going on. Then there's the formal dinner, which, unlike morning, some other family members are invited. It's a little more little more formal. And then there's entertainment after that. Then Krishna goes to bed. Then Krishna gets out of bed. And around the devotees. That's into the wee hours. Yes.
So Maharaj, in the very beginning, you spoke about the book Bhagavat and the devotee Bhagavat, because the book can't ask you, do you understand? So often,
You understood.
yeah, but I mean, often we don't have access either to Bhagavat or even a devotee or even our guru, you know, besides Srila Prabhupada, I mean, you know, where you don't even really feel you have the opportunity or the encouragement to ask, to try to understand. So,
What to do. Right. Yes, that's unfortunate. One thing is that I think that you mentioned it's important, we're not encouraged. I think that better to look at the example of Prabhupada's father. Prabhupada's father had a samskar for listening to sadhus that was in excess. If a person looked like a sadhu or said he was a sadhu, we get the impression from Prabhupada's own telling of it, he would be invited into his home. And Prabhupada wasn't impressed by a lot of the quote unquote sadhus that his father invited, but his father had some scar for that. He had a tendency, had a strong impression to listen and hear from saintly people. And amongst them, many of them were saintly, perhaps only in appearance, one of their belly filled, whatever. And the Prabhupada was a little disenchanted. But when he was encouraged by a friend to meet Bhaktisiddhanta, I think his father's example, you know, ruled over it and said, okay, we'll try it. So Dad used to do this, so you know, okay, maybe there's a real sadhu out there. This was, of course, in the middle of Gandhi's having captured the minds of the youth, everybody in India, and the revolution going on. Every young man was caught up in the Swaraj prospect of liberation, from a political point of view. I think Gandhi was basing it on the Gita and so on and so forth. And of course, he went and saw Bhaktisiddhanta and changed his life and gave up the whole Swaraj of Gandhi and became a disciple ultimately of Bhaktisiddhanta. So anyway, you know the story, but my point is that his father would err on that side. I think we'd be better off erring on that side than developing a samskar from not hearing from sadhus. Trust yourself. You know, you can hear, I mean, you can hear and you can hear. If you didn't like it, you didn't like it. Didn't inspire you. There was something wrong. Ask a question. Get an answer. If you don't get a good answer, okay. But, at least have that tendency to take advantage of sadhusanga, that will behoove us. And the contrary, if we have some scar for not taking advantage of sadhusanga, we really do ourselves a disservice because of how important it is. So that's one point that comes to mind from the way in which you voiced the question. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, if we do what we can, the situation is what it is. We're all over the world, and we're not all living in India and there's sadhus on every corner or whatever. You know, you grow up in an area and got initiated in the area, and there's a temple there, and nobody moves anywhere. Now it doesn't anybody stay in one place anymore. So, so that's what we have to deal with. I mean, we try to extend it, you know, through the mediums of the internet and so on and so forth. But when we don't have association, we avail ourselves to the books, talk amongst our peers and so forth.
and even even reading sometimes, oh, we don't have the inclination to think of inquiring, like kind of, if we don't understand, well, we don't understand, and, not even trying in a way.
Yeah, that's just the evidence that we need good sadhus, because the sadhus are not there to just pat us on the back, and they're there to push us, and challenge our understanding, make us feel uncomfortable. How am I doing? So, make us feel uncomfortable, challenge us, and we can grow. That's the idea. Not just come in and say what everybody wants to hear, and no more than that. And don't make anybody uncomfortable. Everything good. Where's the prashad? So this isn't for that. So by your own question, you can understand my point. It's important, and then you can lament that you don't have good association. Do that lamentation sincerely, then probably you'll get association. Krishna will make an arrangement. How's your husband?
How?
How do you feel?
Well, it's gradually improving, I guess.
Good, give my regards.
Okay.
Old friend of mine,
Mhm.
What else? Yes.
You mentioned that we should meditate on Nanda Maharaj as our father. And I heard in a past kind of recent class, you said each night Nanda has a different cowherd on his lap as he's telling all these tales. And I tend to get overwhelmed by the idea, well, there's unlimited cowherds. So are Nanda and Yashoda similarly unlimited? Like when Krishna goes out and they're eating lunch, every cowherd boy thinks he's looking at me and I'm sharing my lunch with him, and they are. So is that the same dynamic that's happening?
Well, each cowherd has his own mother and father.
Mm-hmm.
But Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda, they're the pinnacle of Vatsalya Rasa. And in a broader sense, they're the father and the mother. Yashoda thinks every girl is her daughter, and every cowherd boy is her son, and she knows each one's favorite dish. And as soon as she sees it, grabs him, pulls him up on the lap. How are you? But those tears, why are you crying? Gopika. She can't tell him Krishna just famous me. He insulted me. She can't say that, but then she wipe her tears away and cook for her. Where she knows every cowherd boy, every gopi, just what they like the most to taste. So see how extensive is her motherhood, right? So I just say that in a broader sense. Every cowherd boy, every gopi has their own mother and father. But until that becomes, that's an extension of one's own bhava. That's what Satya Sankalpa means. Satya Sankalpa means the will of the liberated person is fulfilled. So some aspects of your life in the Lila are extensions of your own bhava. It's a big subject, but just to bring us into the general idea, here are two paradigmatic figures representing Vatsalya Rasa. Nanda and Yashoda, and they're very prominent in the Lila, and every cowherd boy, every gopi feels their mother and father. So think of them that way. I don't know if that answers your question, but when one cowherd boy is sitting on the lap of Nanda, are you asking, is every boy sitting there on the? I mean, the Lila plays itself out not in a linear way. It's not that it's multi-dimensional, as you say. I mean, every cowherd boy thinks Krishna's sitting next to me. I'm putting food in his mouth. He's putting food in my mouth. Everyone thinks that at the same time. So, yeah. You have to go there and find out. You probably have answered the question. Go there and find out. All right, so nice to sit with all of you. Very much appreciate your good company. And hope we'll be together tomorrow afternoon. Have another location.
Flutes on Farm tomorrow.
Rudrashina Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
Jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki